Welcome to this afternoon's HRHuddle. It's great to have so many people with us again. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of managing our employees' mental health in these uncertain times. And we've got Kat Marlow with us as our guest speaker. Lots of you will know Kat. She runs Positive Change, and she is a trained psychotherapist and a mental health specialist. So she's perfect for this afternoon's conversation. So we're going to run it as a Q&A style. So I've got some questions that you have sent to me previously. So thank you everybody who has sent in questions. But as I've just said, if you want to ask anything as we're going along, please put it in the chat room on the right hand side, or unmute yourself and ask the question if you feel like I'm missing you. So, but thank you very much. Thank you. Firstly, thank you to Kat for joining us. Great to have you with us again.
Thank you for having me back. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, I think we'll all be looking forward to it. So, we're just waiting in the waiting room. So let me just add those in. So, let's kick off with some questions first of all, shall we, Kat? And I know our conversation will just go. So since Sunday's wonderful announcement, I think we were all waiting for, weren't we? Yeah. And then a bit of an anticlimax. There's been a lot of focus though on how businesses are going to return their people to work, and that's I've had a lot of questions on this. So how do you think we can best support people with their mental health for those people that are coming back into the office or coming back into the work environment, even if that's remotely, and how we can support them with the fears that they might have?
Okay, I think to start with, it's really important to reinforce the fact that whilst we've all been at sea over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, we're not all in the same boat. So there's going to be lots and lots of different experiences for people. Some people are going to be really happy and really excited to be coming back to work. Other people are going to be very apprehensive. And some people are going to be, quite resistant to the idea of coming back to work for lots and lots of different reasons. And so I think kind of the first thing to remember is that we're not dealing with just, with one mindset. We've got lots and lots of different factors to take into consideration. Obviously, you're going to have parents who still have kids at home. I mean, you've got children who aren't currently in school. And if we suddenly had to go back into the office, that would be a really big challenge. So there are going to be some parents who have got those concerns. There are going to be some people who still have health concerns, who are very worried about their own health and potentially the health of people around them. So if they've got a household member who's shielding, they might be very reluctant to come back into the workplace. But then equally, you're going to have people who have been crawling up the walls for the last couple of weeks and will be desperate to get back into the office. So like I say, the first thing really is being aware that there are going to be lots and lots of different responses to this. There's not going to be one, unanimous and clear way of dealing with people. I think what I'd probably say is, we've had conversations before about emotional needs. Come back to those emotional needs when you're thinking about how to support people as they return to work. If we can think about it from that emotional needs perspective, that's going to give us a really good insight into the challenges that people might be experiencing, and particularly those emotional needs around security, around control, around status as well, so about being communicated with. So I think the most important thing is clarity of communication, taking into account how can I make these people feel as safe as possible, knowing that there is still a lot of uncertainty about what we're doing and what people are being expected to do. How can I give people a measure of control over this? Because I imagine a lot of people will have felt quite out, really had a choice in what they're being asked to do. So, being able to offer them some choices about how they come back to work, if that's possible. That's not always going to be something that you can do, but just thinking about, well, how can we give them some options around this? Are there different choices that we can offer them that will give them a greater sense of their own personal autonomy in this. We're not forcing people to come back into work. We're looking at ways to make this the right experience for us as employers and for our employees as well. So I think I would come back to emotional needs in the first place and just think about it from that perspective, in terms of security and control are going to be really big issues at the moment. How can I try and help my people to feel as secure as possible and give them a measure of choice in what's going on, so that they don't feel like they're being forced into something that they're not comfortable with?
And I think that makes perfect sense to me, because I'd say even in my small micro business, I think I've got people who sit in every camp, people who are desperate to get back to work, people who are still too scared to come back to work, and those that are shielding. So, but within a small business, it is easier to obviously be actually physically able to speak to people. If I give you the situation, even if I can speak, give you the situation, the scenario that somebody's emailed in. So if you've got a lot of people, so you perhaps a standalone HR manager with a large workforce, how is the best way then to communicate with those people and take into account all of their emotional needs?
So obviously at that point you're having to think about sort of the majority rule in terms of what's the most, what's my greatest proportion of my workforce going to be in terms of coming back to work, not wanting to come back to work, that kind of thing. But again, it comes back to just be really clear and concise about communication, be very clear about what people are going to be expected to do, how you're going to do that, the how, what, where, when and why. How do we want you to come back to work? When do we want you to be here? What is that going to look like? Why are we doing this? And maybe start with the why first, give people the reason, because you probably don't want everybody coming back to work. Actually, there will be certain groups of people that you will want to be bringing back into work. There may be other groups of people who you think actually it would be better if we could keep some of those people still out of the office environment and really prioritise who's in to the people who really, really need to be there, either because they can't work from home or because, because actually it would be beneficial for them to come back. But I think, if you're looking at a really big organisation and you're just one HR manager, have a really clear message, cover the how, what, where, when and why, and maybe consider doing some video communication rather than just written communication. So, written communication is really important because you can be very clear and very specific about facts in written communication. And I think a combination of the two can be really powerful. But people will have been missing to some degree that physical connection with work. And so being able to be communicated with by a real person who's sat in front of them, who's very human, that I think can really help with getting the message across. Again, keeping the communication clear, keeping it concise, and possibly even doing, a series of short communications. I'd like to talk to you about why we're starting to bring people back to work and who those people might be. Then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about when we're going to start to do this and what we're going to put in place. And then I'm going to give you the opportunity to come back to me with some questions, and I'll do another, summarizing session to see if we can cover all of those questions. So I think, using a combination of tools to communicate with people can be really useful. But right now, I think actually a couple of short videos just explaining to people and being very human and very, very present in those communications can be quite powerful for people, because they feel like they're being communicated with on an individual level.
Much more personal, isn't it? No, I
love
that.
Absolutely.
Helena's just put in the chat box that they are, and Helena is a standalone HR person with a large workforce, so this is very relevant for her. They're doing a Toolbox talk of what we have to put in place, or what they're putting into place, and what they're doing via Teams, and doing it via Microsoft Teams for those working at home. So really, that's exactly what you're saying, isn't it, Kat?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and you can do, you can do it lots of different ways. You can communicate with everybody all in one go, or you can maybe group it into separate areas of the workforce, depending on, some people are, you might have different arrangements, and so maybe grouping those people into the types of arrangements that you're going to be making for them. But yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea, Helena, is having that toolbox talk. It just makes it a lot more human and a lot more approachable. People will find it easier to engage with that maybe than just having something written down in front of them.
Well, the group that I work for is a large group, and they've put together a 50-page playbook, and they've communicated that out on our group intranet, but not everybody's going to read that. So what we've done is the sort of health and safety guy and myself have condensed it, but we felt that we needed to show, right, these are what we've put in place already to make you safe. These are the additional things we're putting in place, like automatic hand sanitizers we've got. And these are the expectations that we would want people to adhere to, to show those that are in the factory already what we're doing for bringing people back into the office, and highlighting to the office, look, this is what's been going on, this is what you need to adhere to. So we're doing that tomorrow, and we've got don't laugh, it's an operating company pandemic response team, OCPRT. So we're meeting weekly to make sure people are adhering to those rules, because those people that are in place at the moment in the factory, I went in last week, they're actually getting quite complacent about it. So we as a team are going to have to reinforce it.
And especially as you've got more people coming into the environment as well, it makes it even more important, doesn't it, to reinforce those good behaviours and those best practices. And maybe one of the ways of doing that is identifying best practice champions as well, to help to do that. I don't know how you're doing that, but reinforcing it on the shop floor, best practice champions are a really good way of doing that, giving people that sense of owned responsibility.
That's that team that we're putting together. We've got leading hands and supervisors part of that team.
Excellent. That sounds really good. And it sounds like, and you're absolutely right, often the response at a very high company level is we'll put together this massive document and then share it with everybody and assume that everyone's going to read it. So being able to condense that down and put it into manageable chunks of information, because the other thing to remember is that these people haven't really been in work for 6 to 8 weeks. Some of them may have been working from home, some of them may well have been furloughed, some of them may well not have got out of their pajamas in the last couple of weeks very much, and our brains slow down and accommodate the quantity of information that we need to be able to consume. So a lot of people are going to find themselves feeling quite rusty in terms of that more formal communication. So being able to break it down into bite-sized chunks, make it little and often. If you think about it as though you're treating somebody who's had really bad stomach flu, you wouldn't try and sit them down in front of a 3-course meal straight away and force feed them the lot. You'd offer them small, frequent, easily digestible meals. And that's maybe a good metaphor for what we need to be doing with a workforce at the moment. I think Sarah's just said reinforce consistency, and reinforcing consistently is a really good idea. Those small bite-sized chunks that people can take on board without feeling overwhelmed. And that's something else maybe to consider, is how much information are people able to take on board at the moment. You look at what's going on in the news, there's masses and masses of information out there that probably doesn't tell you a great deal. How can we be different to the experience that they're getting through BBC News and the Daily Mail and all the other different news outlets that they might be at Facebook that they'll be accessing? How can we make that experience different for them, in that we give them smaller pieces of information that they consume, but it's much easier to understand and it's got more meaning to it. It's meatier, more meaningful communication.
That's great, Kat. And I think, so it's bite-sized chunks, isn't it, for everybody? And so moving on to another question that people have sent in. So a lot of people who have manufacturing businesses or people on the factory or shop floor, where people have been consistently working, how are we best to deal with their fears about, because their fears will be, you know, as Helen has said, maybe they've got a little bit complacent, maybe they haven't, they've been consistently working, and or even people who have been in offices but very few people in offices, the fear about more people coming back in. So it's the flip of the other side. How we best deal with their fears.
And I think the place to start, the place always to start when you want to understand how people are feeling about something, is our ability to provide upfront feedback. This is what we're planning to do. How do you feel about that? We want to be able to address your fears, but we want to understand what they are first and do it in that. And then it comes back to, you know, bite-sized communication, really clear, really consistent. I imagine in both environments, you know, if you've had people in but you're planning to bring more people in, that fear is going to be around. Well, there's more people around, so there's more risk. So then it's about, you know, explain to people, so what are you doing to manage risk? You know, Helena talked about automatic hand sanitizers. Are you going to be staggering shifts, or people are going to be working slightly shorter days? So to give you a personal example, my brother works in manufacturing. He'll be returning to work next week, I think, and they usually only run a single shift pattern. It's a machine shop, so lots and lots of machinery that lots and lots of people touch. So what his company are looking to do is actually to split their single shift down over 4 shifts across the day. People would be working slightly shorter periods of time, and then they're leaving, I think it's about a 45-minute gap between the end of one shift and the start of the next shift, so that they can clean down toilets, kitchen areas, regularly touched and handled machinery and stuff like that. And that's what they're doing to minimize the risk. And that's been really carefully explained every videos that have been made available. So here's how we're going to manage shift changeover. So what they've done is kind of broken it down into what are all the things that people are going to be concerned about, and they were around how do we get in and out of the building without people coming into contact with each other? How do we make sure that we're not touching stuff and potentially transferring viruses between surfaces? So kind of broke them down into chunks of types of concerns, and they've addressed each one of those in a separate video to help people to understand that, you know, we are aware of the risks. We understand that you're afraid about this. It is okay and perfectly normal to be anxious about these things. We're doing everything we can. We're trying to think of everything. If we haven't addressed one of your concerns, come and tell us. Because we don't know what we don't know, and we can't cover everything. We're all human and we're all fallible. So if there's something that we haven't covered that you're still really concerned about, come and let us know, because you might have picked up on the one thing that we haven't spotted. So it's really important to help people to feel really engaged in the process of coming back to work. It's not, you're coming back to work, this is what you're going to do, that's it, we're telling you. It's inviting them to be part of the process. And again, giving them that choice, giving them that opportunity to feed back into it. And
what about those people that don't want to come back? Yeah, what about those who don't want to come back?
That's a really difficult one, and there will be people who don't want to come back to work for a whole variety of different reasons. Obviously, some of them are going to not want to come back because they look at the news and they look at the infection rate and the death rate and go, it's just not low enough for me yet. I don't feel safe leaving my house at the moment, let alone going to work. There will be others who maybe weren't happy at work before the pandemic and before we went into lockdown, and being at home and being away from work has given them an opportunity to realise as a result they may be very reluctant to come back to work because they're coming back to something that they don't like and they don't want to be a part of anymore. And I think for those people,
their mental health.
So I think you'll probably find that the people who really don't want to come back to work are going to be the exception rather than the rule. The majority of people are going to be concerned. They're going to be anxious. They're going to have fears and they're going to have questions. And you deal with that group. The ones who just flat out refuse to come back or don't want to come back will be a much smaller group. And then I think you do actually have to start to get into individual conversations with people and really understand what's behind that not wanting to come back. Is it because they're very afraid of their own physical health and they're very anxious about the idea of leaving the house and coming back into an environment where there are lots of other people? Is it because they don't like their job, and actually they've had 8 weeks of not doing a job they hate, and realize that they don't want to go back to doing a job they hate? And each of those are going to require a different and more individual response. I think if you can do the reassurance as much as possible with people, you'll get the bulk of people will still maybe feel anxious, but will feel on board and engaged with it. Then it's about addressing those individuals who still have massive concerns. And I think you have to take those more on a case by case basis.
Yeah, and I think we need to respect people, that, like you said at the beginning, that everybody's journey through this has been different, and their responses therefore will be different. And if they're not ready, that individual communicating to perhaps timeframes for when they might be ready, at their pace.
Absolutely, having a plan. Absolutely. For some people it will be just about, I'm not ready yet. Great, so let's talk about having a plan to get you back into work. For others it might be, I'm never going to be ready, and then that's a completely different conversation for HR to have.
Interestingly, because obviously I speak to a lot of people, and people who job seekers or passive people in the market, and actually a lot of people have taken this time to really reevaluate what they want out of their lives, and whether their current role does meet all their needs, and some people have, with that space, thought actually it does, and other people have used the time then to look for something else, which obviously is going to happen, isn't it? So what about, I know I've got clients that have got people that are saying that, how do we support the mental health of those people that are desperate to come back to work, those people that are climbing the walls and get back to work, but from a business perspective they still need them to be remote working, so perhaps they can't come back into the office full time or part time. How are we best to manage their expectations, do you think?
So I think it's back to that really clear communication about what the roadmap is to get everybody back into work. So we can't have you guys back full time right now. This is what we can offer you, and here's the reason why we're doing it this way. For those people that are really struggling, then it might be that you think about offering them the opportunity to explore what it is that's leaving them frustrated, why they're so desperate to get back to work with somebody else. And some of these, some of the things that are going to come up are not going to be things that as HR professionals you might be best equipped to deal with. And we've spoken earlier, Eloise, about the importance of, if you've already got arrangements in place to support your employees' mental health, if you have arrangements with EAPs or anything like that, then I would absolutely advise you to be pushing those phone numbers and those services to all of your employees. This is going to be a difficult, uncomfortable journey back into work. It was a real surprise. Certainly, people will have struggled with that very abrupt stop to work, but they're also going to struggle with the going back to work as well. And some people are going to need to explore that in a greater level of depth than your HR department are going to be able to support. So if you've got services in place already for supporting mental health with your teams, then I would be pushing that and reminding people that those services are there. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling really concerned about this, if you're experiencing some distress about the idea of coming back to work, we would encourage you to make use of the services we've got available. If you don't have those in place, it might be worth thinking about how you can provide some level of service like that, whether it's getting somebody who can be available for a defined period of time for people to be able to go and have a half hour or a 1 hour chat with and just work through some of the stuff that they're feeling. I think those people who are desperate to get back into work and who can't be there for whatever reason may well struggle more than others, and may well benefit from that opportunity to explore why they really want to get back to work.
Definitely. I found something really interesting the other day. I've been doing lots of blogs and putting information on our website and sending it out to people to, you know, just try and help in any way that we can. And obviously, because we've been pooling lots of information from the huddles that we've been doing and conversations. And on one of my blogs, and one of the very first ones, I put lots of links at the bottom. And interestingly, throughout the whole blog, the most people clicked on the Samaritans link. So yeah, there were links to other useful content, links, you know, the BBC, but the one thing that people were, the majority, the largest number of clicks went through to the Samaritans. And I thought that was quite early on through this this. It was really interesting and quite it surprised me. I'd say, you know, it did surprise me. But staying on this topic, then obviously, you know, as we are coming back into work, as things do start easing, and people we're taking people off furlough who have perhaps potentially been on furlough for 2-3 months. That's not a holiday. That's
no, it's not. It's something different, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, and like you said earlier, you know, our brains slow down to deal with the amount of information that we have. How can we support the mental health of those people coming back to work and get them firing again? Because as businesses, we need people to be don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you know, I was talking to somebody the other day who said, well, you know, it's just it's no different to the school holidays. And I kind of went, yeah, but when was the last time you took a 6-week school holiday? I don't think I've taken a 6-week school holiday since I left school. And even if you are used to taking those kind of longer periods of time off work for holiday, this hasn't had that holiday vibe to it. There's been an awful lot more going on for people. I expect that, I don't know about you guys, but my experience of working with people through the last 6 or 8 weeks is sleep is a really big thing for people. Even, you know, people who usually sleep quite well, usually, you know, don't struggle too much, are finding that either sleep is harder to come by, or they're sleeping more or sleeping a lot less, or being disturbed by dreams. And a lot of that will be, even if they don't outwardly feel anxious during the day, will be anxieties that are building up that play through at night instead. So in some respects, and I'll go back to that analogy of somebody who's had stomach flu, and you wouldn't force feed them a 3-course meal as soon as they stop being sick. You provide them meals little and often. The vast majority of people are going to be all right about coming back to work on a reasonably normal basis in terms of hours. There are going to be some who are going to struggle a bit more with that, and I think in some respects it's about being watchful and watching those people as they come back to work and seeing how people are adapting. It might be that you decide that as an organisation you're not going to go hell for leather from day one, and you're going to do almost like a phased return to work for people across the board, recognising that when you've been at home for a couple of weeks, let alone 6 or 12 weeks, you're probably not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're probably not going to bed as early as you usually would. You're not rushing around. You're not operating at the usual speed. You're not thinking as quickly as you usually do, because you just don't need to. And it takes time for people to readjust. One of the analogies I sometimes use as well is people who've been, you know, like a deep sea diver. You know, if you've spent several hours on the bottom of the ocean on the floor, you wouldn't come back up to the surface straight away because it'll give you the bends. It's kind of true of coming back to work after a prolonged period of time. You want to do it by degrees. So it might be that you say that, you know, the working day is only going to be 5 hours for the first week, so that we can allow people to start to adjust and acclimatise back into that different environment, which won't be as relaxed as being at home, and will have a greater expectation that people are going to sit and get on and think and do. And those who've been working from home will find that adjustment easier, because it will be more about having to get themselves out of the house in the morning and journeying to work. And just who've maybe furloughed will find that a lot more challenging. And it might be that actually you look at, you know, either reducing hours to start with, or can those furloughed people start working from home? You know, if they weren't furloughed because they couldn't work at all, because I know a lot of companies have furloughed people who could work from home, just because nothing else is going on, so there's no point them working either. Is there an option to maybe look at those people who haven't been working from home, who could, to get them started doing hours from home and then bringing them back into the office as they adjust to and get used to a more normal working day again? Again, I think the vast majority of people are going to be okay, and will probably find it very tiring and a bit irritating to start with, but there will be the few who find this really challenging, and it's about being able to spot who those few are and then being adaptable and flexible and helping them get back into work without feeling like they're somehow doing something wrong, or they're, you know, they're not able to cope. It's just, we're all different and we all adjust to different situations in different ways. So I think being able to reinforce and reassure people that if you don't manage to get back to work straight off and feel great about it, that's okay, because there are lots and lots of people in the same situation who will be finding this really challenging and really difficult, and it's okay to take it a step at a time. We will get there. It might just take us a little bit longer than perhaps we'd like.
I think everything's taking.
Those challenging, again, it's about having a plan. Yeah.
Everything's taking a little bit longer than we first, I think, anticipated.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, definitely. Jo's put a comment in the chat box just saying that she's an L&D consultant, consultant, and she's been running some workshops with clients who want to get their people used to the idea of coming back to work again.
Yeah.
Our workshops on things like emotional resilience, communication, and leadership, which sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Then the feedback's been really positive. Colleagues have been meeting on Zoom and getting them back into that mindset slowly.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is building up that work mindset, not just dropping people straight back into a work environment and assuming that they're going to float, because an awful lot of them will sink. So I really like what Jo's been doing, actually, in terms of getting people ready for the idea of going back to work, and giving them the opportunity to think about what it's going to be like, to explore some of the challenges that maybe they're going to have that they might not have had before. I think, you know, looking at emotional resilience is a really good idea, encouraging people to take responsibility for their own emotional well-being. And again, you know, coming back to those emotional needs, how are you going to make sure that you feel secure, you feel in control, that you're getting enough attention, you're giving enough attention, that you feel part of a community, that you feel competent. I imagine that there will be people who struggle with competence to start with, coming back into the workplace, because if they've not been working for a little while, everything's going to feel really rusty. And so
weeks, don't we, after you've had
exactly.
You can't remember what any of your computer passwords are, or how to use email.
Exactly. And so just being cognizant of that as well, that people are going to come in and go, oh, I can't remember what my email, I haven't logged into my email for a month, I can't remember what the password is. And having all of that support in place is going to be really important to people's emotional well-being. So knowing that there's somebody from IT on hand to reset passwords if they need to.
But I guess as well, it's then about, you know, again, in bigger organisations, educating and supporting the team leaders,
absolutely,
the managers, and you know, all the people that are in between you as HR professionals or business owners and everybody else. So it's making sure that we're, I guess it's, you know, be kind, isn't it? You know, that's a slogan that's going around.
Yeah.
Making sure that we are aware that, and that the managers and the line managers are aware that people are going to struggle to come back in, and maybe they might struggle themselves, and just to be conscious of that, and potentially then some coaching for the line managers and managers who are going to be at the coal face dealing with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's really important that those who are in contact with, you know, with the team, so the line managers and the supervisors and team leaders, are able to approach this in a really non-judgmental way. And we do have to be, you're right, kind, very accepting that everybody's on a different journey at the moment. Some of us might be broadly on the same journey with slight deviations, but all broadly heading in the right direction. But there are going to be some people in the team who are on a completely different path back. And we just need to be aware of that, and not measure people against other parts of the population. Everybody will get there in their own time. Some people it's going to take a bit longer. Some are going to find it a bit more challenging. And it's being able to spot those people and be flexible, be adaptable, put the right plans in place to support them so that they feel supported, not punished for the fact that they're not able to just walk straight back into work after 12 weeks out.
Jumping on to one of the next questions then. So a lot of organisations, you know, no matter what size, have sent out either pulse surveys or kind of temperature checks, or spoken to their people to find out how people have been feeling during this situation, which is great. That's what we did on previous huddles. It's you know, engaged and continuing to speak to them. But as things continue, how do you think we could ensure that we're getting continuous feedback?
That's a really good question. I think each organisation is going to have a feel for how much their own people can tolerate in terms of providing feedback. But I think having a clear idea of what you want to understand in the first place is really important. So, you know, if it's about people's emotional well-being, then being really clear about what questions you're asking them and what you're going to do with that information when you've got it. In a previous job that I had, we ran a well-being. We used to have a big pulse survey, and pulse engagement survey. And one of the key things that came out was people's well-being was generally low. People were feeling very lacking in motivation. They didn't feel particularly emotionally well cared for. So we focused on that specifically, and we did a very, very focused, very detailed emotional health and well-being survey, which allowed us to really start to understand what it was that people were struggling with. And then beyond that, we invited people to take part in we did it weekly actually, and it was literally a traffic light system. And we used Google Forms. It was all anonymous unless people wanted to leave their names on it. And so once a week, people could just check in and traffic light themselves. I'm green, I'm amber, I'm red. And then we had 3 fairly simple optional questions that they could answer as well, in terms of what's working, what's not working, you know, what would I like to see different, that kind of thing. If people wanted to put their names onto the surveys, they could, and they actually did. The ones who were marking themselves up as red, after sort of 3 or 4 weeks of filling in the survey, was starting to put comments like, I'd really like to be able to speak to somebody. I'm finding things really difficult at the moment. And so we were able to generally gauge the health of the of that part of the organisation, looking at a traffic light system. So 75% of the organisation are saying they're green, you know, 20% are saying that they're amber, and here's some of the things that they flagged up as being potential things that we need to look out for, and 5% are red, and 2 of those, you know, 2% of that 5% have actually asked if they can have some more help. So that, you know, that's one way of doing it. You will know, each of you know, whether or not that's going to work in your organisation. But I think keeping it really simple, keeping it quite non-specific, not too many questions, something that people can do in a couple of button presses is really useful. That'll give you an overall sense of what's going on at an organisational level. If you then give people the option of opting in to ask for help, you might be surprised how many people actually make use of that. If people know that the default is that this is anonymous and I can just give feedback and you're going to use it to make my life better, my experience has been that people quite like that. And then when you give them the option of being able to say, and actually, this is who I am and I really want some help, people will take that up. But it's about explaining what you're using it for, being really clear again in the communication. We're going to collect this information. You don't have to give us any information if you don't want to. Take 2 minutes, 1 minute every week to just press a button on a website. That's really going to help us to understand how everybody's generally feeling. it will help us to make sure that we're making the right changes, making the right tweaks to ensure that as many people as possible are feeling as emotionally comfortable as possible at work.
And I guess that's a brilliant answer, Kat, because I think that takes into account the next thing that I was going to lead on with, which is the best way to gauge how our employees are feeling and identify emerging issues. But if you're kind of doing weekly feedback, that would cover those. And I love the traffic light system. I think that's really,
traffic lights work really well. It's really simple for people.
But I guess also businesses need to take into account their workforce, don't they? As you know, do people have access to computers? Not everybody does. So it's
and you know, interesting, we trialed exactly the same approach on the track floor, where the majority of the associates didn't have an email address, let alone access to a computer. And you know when, if you go into Waitrose, or I don't know, Asda do it as well, where you get tokens that you can put into the charity box. You can decide which charity you're going to donate your token to this week. We did the same thing, but with a horizontal traffic light with 3 boxes, and every week there was a box full of counters, and the guys were encouraged to, at some point during the day, take a counter and chuck it in the green box, the amber box, or the red box. And just at a really quick and dirty level, we could see what proportion of the organisation were relatively happy with the way things were versus not at all happy. And then there was a you know, like a locked box for people who could put in a request for help if they wanted it. Simple. And they just posted their name in there, and they could, if they wanted to, say what help they wanted. But that was emptied once a week, and they'd be contacted by a member of the wellbeing team who would say, you know, I see that you've popped your name in the box. You're looking for a bit of help. What are you looking for? What can we help you with at the moment? And taking those conversations from there. And for some people, it was, I don't like the station that I'm on, and I really can't get on with my line manager. For other people, it's like, I'm really struggling at the moment. You know, I'm feeling very low, or I'm feeling very anxious. And so, depending on what that first conversation brought out, then enabled the right kinds of help to be offered and the right kind of following on conversations to be had. So it's possible to do that kind of thing where people don't have access to a computer, and you can be quite creative about it as well.
Yeah, I love that. Great. So the next question then. So again, we've got HR people on the call that have, you know, from lots of different backgrounds. So somebody's emailed in saying that, you know, there's again standalone HR with a large workforce, and they rely on line managers to speak with their team. Are there any tips that you can share as to how they can help their line managers to make sure that they are picking things up with their teams and noticing when things aren't going well for them?
So I have a little model that we used at a previous organisation, and it's a really simple 3-step approach for line managers. Now, this kind of assumes that line managers are talking to their staff on a fairly regular basis in some way, shape or form. But the first step is inquire, ask questions of the individuals on your team. And I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. The second step is listen. You know, really actively listen to the people that you're working with and supporting. And then the third step is provide support. So offer appropriate information and enable the individuals to start to identify their own solutions, but be able to point them the right way, that they're not in a position to identify their own solutions. So in terms of inquire, you know, maybe helping your line managers by providing them with a list of handy questions, you know, like a start of a 10 list of questions. So how are you feeling today? How long have you felt that way? Because for some people, it might just be that they've only felt like this way today, and today's a blip. Today's a bad day, and tomorrow will be okay. But other people, they might say, do you know what? I feel really rubbish. I'm really struggling, and I felt like it for a couple of weeks now. And then already you've got a different sense of the direction for that conversation based on how long have you felt that way. Is this ongoing? You know, has this been going on for quite a long time? Does it come and go? Do you want to somebody that you can get support from? So being able to identify whether they've got support outside of work is really important, because if you're the only person who's asked them and shown any interest at all, again, that's potentially a different conversation to have with them. Is it work related? Great question to ask, often overlooked, because for some people it will be a really isolated issue to something very specific at work, and it might be really, really easy to resolve as well. But just asking the question, is it work related, is a really good start. And is there anything I can do to help? As your line manager, can I help in any way? Is, you know, can I go and have conversations with somebody? Is there anything I can do for you? And not being afraid to ask that question. And that's not about offering to fix other people's problems for them, but it's about being curious about what that person's looking for. And then when we talk about listening, it's about largely about being able to avoid making assumptions. So just the story, being able to accept that their experience might not be your experience. And you might be sitting there going, well, this is just mental. I would never feel like that, but they're not you. And equally, you're not them. So just being able to, you know, sit with that and listen. And if you don't understand, ask them questions about it. I don't know what I don't know what that feels like. I don't know how that would be. Can you tell me some more about what that's like for you? Because then you're gathering more information. You're having a better understanding of what this person might be struggling with. Be patient and be present. You know, so switch your mobile phone off. Do it away from the desk. Have those conversations in a place where you can really give that person your time and your attention, even if it's only 10 minutes. And it might be that you decide that, you know, every couple of weeks you want to have a well-being check-in with the team as we go through this process of getting everybody back to work. And a line manager might say, well, I'm going to allow half an hour for each conversation. It doesn't matter if he doesn't use the full half an hour, but knowing that we've got this much time to have that conversation, being really clear at the start of the conversation. We've got 20 minutes, we've got half an hour to have a chat. I'm just really interested to understand how you're getting on at the moment. How are you feeling? And then in terms of support, concerns and their worries and their fears and what they're experiencing seriously, but being positive and supportive while you're doing that. So not getting stuck in their problems. Oh, that sounds awful. That must be really terrible. You know, trying to keep it so that it's supportive rather than getting sucked down into their problems. You know, taking into account maybe cultural differences, because that can be really important. Some people don't want your help, and not offering glib advice. So if people have got serious problems, and line managers understanding that there are appropriate ways of dealing with that, making sure they've got all of the support in place so that they understand where that is. Where can I signpost a member of staff to that is struggling at the moment? Because ultimately your line managers are not going to be able to resolve all of the problems that people have got. You know, if they're work related, they can probably get the ball rolling. But for the more emotional and well-being type problems, all they can do is get the conversation started. And then it's about making sure that your line managers have all the information they need. So if I've got a member of my team who's really struggling at the moment, what do I do with them? Because otherwise I've taken the lid off and I can't put it back on again. And that person could end up feeling really uncontained, having kind of opened up to their line manager and said, yeah, I am really struggling at the moment. There's nothing I can do to help you, but thanks for telling me. And making sure that there is that right support process in place for line managers to go, right, so I hear what you're saying. Here's what we can do. Here's what I can offer you from a work perspective. But also making sure that maybe you've got a set of outside contact organisations that you can signpost people to as well. And, you know, keeping the conversations open and non-confrontational. So using the TED approach when you're trying to elicit information from people. Tell me about, explain to me, describe that. So rather than using kind of, you know, the what and why type questions, tell me a bit more about that. Can you explain what that's like for you? How does that impact, you know, explain how that impacts you on a day-to-day basis. How is that making it more difficult for you to do your job right now? Describe what it feels like when that happens, so that I can understand better how you're feeling, and maybe I'll be able to we can start to look for ways to. So I think, you know, being able to provide line managers with a crib sheet of questions they can ask and tips around how to actively listen and how to provide that appropriate support is probably going to be really useful for people. So because they're going to be potentially asking more of those kinds of questions than they have done in the past. Like
you said, Kat, then knowing what they can do for that person and actually how they should react in that situation. So great response to that question. I think so. Maybe businesses where in HR you are relying, or business owners that are relying on other managers, then actually we need to invest some time coaching and role plays with those managers to make sure that
absolutely, because not everybody's going to be comfortable with having those kinds of conversations either, especially if they've not had to have them before. So absolutely being supportive of your line managers and coaching and helping them to feel confident about being able to have slightly more difficult conversations, and maybe not focusing on the difficult side of the conversation and just focusing on helping them to feel confident in any kind of conversation that they have with their staff. So yeah, I think kind of coaching and encouraging line managers a really, really good idea. An alternative to that, obviously, if you're a single HR in a big organisation, is maybe if you've already got mental health first aiders in place, making more use of those, publicising again who those people are, making people aware that they're there to go to for a conversation, to get support. If you don't have mental health first aiders in your organisation at the moment, maybe looking at building a network of mental health champions, people who are happy to step up into that role and be the person that somebody else can come to and say, can I get a cup of tea and a chat, because I'm finding things really hard at the moment. And sometimes that's all people need, is the opportunity to just have a chat with somebody that they don't work with immediately, that isn't their line manager, who is just going to listen and go, that sounds really tough at the moment. What can we do to help? What can you do? Can I guide you in any way? So if you haven't got those people already, thinking about getting those people in place, and actually that's not a bad thing to have, COVID-19 or not, moving forwards.
Interestingly, I think it was about a month before all of this happened, before COVID-19 changed the world, we nominated, or a couple of people volunteered the mental health champions within, and they went on a course with Gateway HR just in Cornwall. It was fabulous. It's a bit of a plug for Gateway HR. I'm sure there are plenty of other mental health courses that people can go on, but that one was particularly good, and two of my consultants came back and said they found it really valuable. And so they're then there to support the rest of the business. So, I'm going to go on to my last question now, Kat. If anybody's got any other questions they want to put to Kat, please put them in the chat box now, because we are going to wrap up shortly, because I want to keep this really within the hour. But we've talked, Kat, about people who have been on furlough and them coming back. We've talked about remote workers. We haven't talked hugely about our key workers and the people that have been working consistently, except for allaying their fears about more people coming back in. But on a general basis at the moment, how can we best support key workers' mental health? Because obviously a lot of pressure has been put on them.
Yeah. And I think in some respects, those are the people that you maybe want to have more one-to-one conversations with, and just really understand how has it been for them for the last 6 to 8 weeks. How are they feeling right now? What do they need? And it might be that those are the people who are kind of really feeling the strain at the moment and might need some extra help, or some time away from the office. If they're the ones who've been consistently in the office for the last 8 weeks, it might be that as you start bringing other people back, you might look at ways for them to have a little bit of time to get settled in. I'm guessing that those of you who've got key workers, those are going to be a lot less people than you've had out of the office potentially. And so I think really it's engaging with them on a one-to-one level and saying, look, I know the last 8 weeks have been really difficult, it's been really hard, you've worked really hard to keep everything going, we really appreciate the effort that you put in, and recognizing the effort that's gone into it, recognizing how hard it's been, recognizing that they've put themselves in a, you know, in a potentially riskier situation than everybody else has had to, and acknowledging that and recognizing it will be really important for them. And then, yeah, understanding it. So how are you feeling right now? You know, things are changing again. Are you okay at the moment? Are you coping? Is there anything that you need? You know, is there anything that needs to change? Because they've been there throughout that. They may well have spotted stuff that needs to change, but haven't thought to mention it, to understand how it's been, and just asking them how they're coping, because that's the easiest way to find out how somebody's feeling, is to just ask them.
Brilliant. So we need to communicate, don't we?
Absolutely. Clearly and consistently in small amounts.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Just Helen has just popped something in the chat group saying my group did a video of all those that have been in the factories and highlighted them as heroes. And then that video was put on the group intranet. I think
that's really lovely. That's brilliant. It's a really nice way of recognising those people who have been there throughout, keeping everything running in the background. And I mean, and we all know that actually when it comes to it, it's not money that people feel rewarded by, it's being recognised for the effort that they're putting in. It's being made to feel important. So if there are opportunities to do that with your key workers and to flag them up and give them that sense of importance, to give them that sense of having done something really valuable for the organisation, I think that's a really, really great thing to do. And it will be a boost to them. You know, people might be feeling tired and low and anxious, but getting that can be a real boost.
Brilliant. Kat, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
Questions. It was a great session, and what I'll do afterwards, everybody, when I send you the link, I'll send you Kat's contact details, email and telephone number, because I know if you've got any issues and you actually think I just want to speak to Kat in private, then you can do so. And I know, Kat, you're at the other end of the phone whenever anybody
absolutely, and really happy to help out with, you know, in terms of if you've got issues getting people back to work and you're looking for somebody who can help provide support at all, you know, give me a shout, and we might be able to work something out so that I can help you to support your people going back to work as well.
That's brilliant. So thank you for joining us, everybody. I will send the video out in the next couple of days once we've, you know, edited any technical issues or anything like that out. Do feed back to me if there's anything else that you would particularly like us to cover in the huddle. The things that we've got coming up are specifically looking at planning for returning to work, and I was potentially looking at doing that slightly differently, whereby people share practically what they are doing. So it is more of a peer-to-peer learning and best practice share, because you'll all be doing great things, and it's, you know, what one business is doing could be really valuable to somebody else, and vice versa. So I've got that planned in. And then another suggestion that somebody made, which I thought was brilliant, was about team building after this. So as we come back together, you know, in the future, you know, when we're not so much working from home, you know, making sure that we're bringing people who have been on furlough, people who haven't been on furlough, you know, if there's any there, you know, making sure that we're doing lots of team building to that and get productivity back to where we need it to be in our growing businesses. Sorry, Kat, were you going to say something then?
I was just saying, you know, that opportunity to rebuild that sense of community in the workplace. Yeah,
that's what it will be on. So they're the things that we've got coming up over the next month. But any other ideas, please email me or pick up the phone and speak to me. Love speaking to people. That would be fabulous. But thank you for joining us all today. Take care, stay safe, and I will hopefully see you all very soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Kat. Bye.